That will help me decide whether to skip some of the introduction or run those as well. Okay, good to know, Philip. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Aditya. So you're familiar with UiPath, but no knowledge of SAP, no worries. All right, if that's the case, I will skip through some of the introduction slides and I'll straight away go to SAP. So here's actually one example of how the bots work in action. They use SAP. There's not much you would know. Just looking at the demo of it, it interacts with SAP to retrieve some information. I will, however, run it and then quickly skip to what's on offer for SAP automation. So here's a bot in action, which reads an Excel file. It's trying to generate an expense report for a manager. RPA technology is basically anything that you can you can do using a keyboard and a mouse. The bot is capable of emulating that, be it launching applications, logging into them, retrieving information, or writing into them. The bot is capable of doing that. It works very well with structured data. With the recent advancements with AI and ML, it's able to make some decisions as well. And also with UiPath document understanding, we are able to retrieve values from scanned documents. But just for that's at a very high level. Specific to this particular session, we'll see what's available in order to automate SAP applications, what are the different types of connectors we have, what activities are there in UiPath Studio that enable you to interact with SAP. Now, the reason why it's different from all other applications is SAP uses its own proprietary technology. So it's not the usual way how you would identify elements such as the one that you're seeing on the screen. So in this particular example, all the bot did was launch multiple applications, one being a legacy green screen mainframe application, the other a Salesforce. And then at the bottom, you had seen the SAP, if I'm not wrong, it's the 740 GUI or the 640 GUI. It's able to interact with SAP applications which are GUI-based, which are API-based, and even legacy one, which is the SAP business one as well. Now, this is our platform. We basically categorize all our products into different pillars, and at the core is the robots that will actually execute the automations that you build. In order to build these automations, we have multiple enablers. Obviously, Studio is the tool that you would use to build automations. That family comprises of three tools. One is the Studio Pro, which is the feature-rich and the most advanced one, enabling you to build any type of automation, including tests. Then there's Studio X, which is more so for business users who would be able to build their own automations, and they don't need to have any advanced knowledge of any type of programming or any concepts that will help them, let's say, use loops or if statements, switch cases. So Studio X will prompt them to choose what they want to do and automatically try and build those activities for them. And then we have recently launched Studio Web as well. That's to automate anything that you that does not require you to interact with any Windows or desktop-based applications, as long as they're web-based or API-based or database activities or integration with any of the other applications that offer an API. You're able to do that using Studio Web. For that, you don't need to install UiPath Studio. It's straight away from the orchestrator. You launch it in the browser, and you're able to start building automations. Integration services is our most recent addition to all our products. What it allows you to do is connect to different applications that offer APIs, so that the language that UiPath talks to is uniform across all these applications. You can also monitor. It's more like a service bus. You can monitor how many requests were sent and the number of calls that you make to different applications is captured, and also we license this particular product based on the number of calls you make. Document understanding is to read such documents such as invoices, purchase orders, receipts, utility bills, which will have data in either structured or semi-structured format. You could also understand handwriting as long as it's very legible and it's in uppercase. We can identify if a document has a signature or not, and you could use that to basically do AP, AR in finance. That's accounts payable and accounts receivable, where you're trying to retrieve information from an invoice and entering it into SAP or Salesforce or any other ERP, CRM system. Marketplace and integrations is where a lot of our customers, partners, and community members have already built some solutions that they think others can reuse. So they have uploaded it to Marketplace, and it goes through a stringent and strict validation, verification, and we hold it to high standards based on the UiPath standards. And then if it's approved, it gets a place in the marketplace where you can straight away download, and you'll save on your implementation costs. Some of these solutions are monetized, some of them are free, so you're happy to explore those. Without going into any further details on the manage, engage, and discover, I'd like to just focus on SAP, but feel free to look through all the other upcoming sessions on different product suites, such as Test Manager. There's the Document Understanding and AI Center session happening tomorrow. Feel free to register for that. And there's the Process Mining and Automation Hub, as well as task capture sessions in the upcoming session. So feel free to look through those and register. Now, as you must be aware, UiPath tools work with any application. They don't have any tight coupling with any of these applications. They can completely sit outside of that, be agnostic of those applications. And if a human can basically interact with any of these applications using the UI, the bots can do as well. If those applications expose any APIs that can be leveraged or consumed, then that's even better. So we could use UiPath to even consume those APIs. That's a more quicker and a robust, reliable way to access information in those systems. So that's supported as well. We are certified by SAP, and in fact, we are the only company that's been certified for UI automation, API automation, as well as integrating with SAP Solutions Manager for test automation. So, and we are authorized to use that their logos for establishing credibility that we are certified, and we work with all of the different versions of SAP that's been launched so far. Here's an example of invoice processing in SAP. There's a bot that is going to look into some information in an invoice and enter that into SAP. Those invoices can either come in an email, they can be saved at a shared location, or they can also be extracted from SharePoint or any other repository you might be using. What it will do is access that invoice, read some information from it, such as invoice date, totals, line items, subtotals, and then enter that information into SAP and then send an email. So currently, the bot is going to monitor a particular email inbox for new emails that have an attachment which could be an invoice. So document understanding is able to determine if a particular document that's attached to an email, what's the document type, whether it's an invoice, whether it is a receipt, or completely a different document such as a bank statement. And then once we determine the document type, it is able to extract information from it. Once that extraction is complete, here you can see a bot in action entering that information into a specific transaction within SAP. It's able to detect and identify all these controls. If you have tried to build some automations, you notice that identifying these elements is not always a success using RPA technology. Uh, so there are multiple ways you could do it. I'll talk through those as we move along. But here you have seen a bot in action where the bot is able to enter the information into SAP and send an email. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we have several products within our suite, and this is just to highlight all of these products have a component to connect to SAP, and when and where is determined by the use case. Um, if you're aware of attended and unattended automation, we support tools that interact with SAP while you're interacting with the bots, or we can have them run in the background, such as you can access SAP to generate a report and send that report the next day when you're back in office. If SAP is behind Citrix or on a remote desktop, that's not a problem either. UiPath has a remote runtime plugin that can be installed on the Citrix as well as the remote server, and you can have the studio outside of that server and still be able to interact with all of those elements. If in case you're not allowed to install any of these plugins or extensions on those remote machines or Citrix behind the Citrix application, we can still use UiPath computer vision to detect and identify the elements and still build an automation solution. You might be familiar with this, you might not be. So this is the UiPath Studio, where you basically drag and drop activities from the activities panel onto the canvas, main canvas. Those activities help you perform several operations, including interacting with different applications, UI-based applications, uh, by highlighting those elements, identifying them, trying to specify anchors if there are elements that are very similar, but they are unique when you combine with the labels beside those fields that's on the screen. Now, for SAP, we have a set of pre-built activities that you can leverage. You'll find them under Manage Packages, and if you type uipath.sap.activities, you'll find all of these activities that you can see on the screen. Uh, you can build a nice generic business process, or you could build a unique test case where you're trying to test if a certain operation in SAP is giving you the desired output or not. I'll quickly show you that as well. So at a high level, we have seen businesses that use our software use it in these particular what we say functions within the departments. So, for example, if you take finance, obviously SAP has a very good database and a function that you can build for your business to do automatic disbursement of invoices that your businesses might receive, or to even process a purchase orders, or to do end-to-end procurement within SAP. Now, you'd probably use different SAP products for doing all of this. Now, SAP Concur is for your expense management. HANA is your more modern tool, which has inbuilt analytics built into it, success factors for any employee onboarding or HR related activities. So UiPath interacts with all of these applications. There's no challenge that that it faces in retrieving or entering information into these applications. Now, what are the different types of SAP applications? You have Windows-based GUI interaction. That's the graphical user interface for SAP. You have multiple versions of it over the number of years. SAP has enhanced their SAP product, and UiPath is able to interact with all of those applications, including the legacy versions from SAP. It is also able to interact with the more modern SaaS-based web GUI that SAP has launched very recently. It can make submissions or retrieve information from any of the web GUI. That includes the Fiori 3.0 and HANA-based SAP products. It can also interact with the legacy SAP Business One client. Now, at certain times, you might have to use computer vision to interact with this application. However, that's to ensure your automation solution is more robust to any changes, and it can detect even a table or a grid. And if you have to enter some information in the cells, you'll be able to do that. Now, these are some of the data formats that SAP gives as an output, or you create when you interact with other applications. So UiPath can use any of these formats in order to update any of the ERP system, depending on what you have it as configured to work with other applications within your organization. As shown before, all of these activities come as a SAP WinGUI activity pack. Now, what do? They offer a deep and certified integration between UiPath and SAP. What that means is we are able to understand that proprietary technology that SAP uses and create these activities so as to enable you to interact with any complex type of an element that's on the SAP screen, which could include, let's say, a dynamic tree, or looking at a status bar to oftentimes SAP indicates a success only in the status bar. When you perform an operation in SAP, you would know that that's been successful or that's a failure only when you look at the status bar. So we have built an activity for that, to read that status bar notification to know what the actual outcome of a particular operation on the screen is. Sometimes the input control could be a date field, and SAP might require you to enter it only via a calendar type of a widget or a control on the screen. We are able to enter that information. I've built an activity specifically to do that. There are certain menu items within SAP that regular UiPath UI automation would not be able to recognize, and thus you'd have to use this pre-built SAP activity to select those menu items. Similarly, you have another activity for table cell scope. Okay. Now, what are accelerators for SAP? Now, there are about 200, more than over 200 out of the box automations for SAP on our marketplace. That's marketplace.uipath.com/bundles/SAP, where you would find pre-existing solutions that you can simply download, read the documentation for how to using that specific accelerator, install it in your UiPath environment, or and add those packages to your studio to build your automations. So how does this help? Well, it will help you quickly build those automations. You don't need to know how the SAP BAPI what we say APIs work. You just have to interact with the UiPath activities, and they in turn will be able to execute those SAP BAPI API calls. So ensuring that what you're doing is very stable and robust, and also the The activities that you use in your studio can be leveraged for regular business workflow automation or for even any application testing. Now, here are some of the examples of those accelerators segregated by departments. You have an accelerator for your SAP ERP foundation. That's basically the main backbone of SAP that supports interaction with the underlying database that SAP had built based on enterprise relationship it had with several enterprises, and it understood how businesses work and what they need in terms of information and how the data should flow. So later down, you'll also know how UiPath has built process mining, which is like an X-ray into the business to identify use cases, the flow, the activities within use cases. Now, some of the subject matter experts within your business will tell you what the process is and how they execute it, but in reality there might be several variations to that, and there could be several exception paths as well, which is not very obvious from the application interface. Now, UiPath process mining will help you glean into that information by generating workflows by itself, by generating all those alternative paths, and it will show you which of those transactions within a given month or within a given period of time, say a quarter or a year, how many of those transactions have gone through any of these exception paths or those variations to the normal flow. And you can even drill down into a specific transaction to see who has performed what. For example, if somebody has forgotten to approve an invoice and that was sitting there for over a month and aging, while it had to be dispersed within that month, you'll be able to narrow down into what the reasons were, who was responsible for that, and then get some business insights into that. Now, this is another uh, delving deeper into how you would use a SAP accelerator. For example, if you're using one for manufacturing, these are all the actions that you can perform, such as creating a planned order or releasing it and deleting it. So there are several activities depending on what you want to do within SAP. This is another example of invoice processing again. However, over here you will have a bot collaborate with the human to either get an input or to validate that specific data that the bot sees. So this is the UiPath assistant using which you will trigger a particular automation that has been built. Now that runs, it will pick a particular document from say a secure shared folder location, and then it will convert that into something that's machine readable. Once that's done, it's going to take that particular document and uh, send it to document understanding. And once the document understanding understands what fields are present on this particular document, I'll try and pause here. It's going to extract all of that information. Now, hopefully this is legible enough. You can see a percentage score beside each value that the bot has extracted. At the top, you can see the document type that it has identified this as an invoice with an 81% confidence. So those percentages are confidence scores of the bot. Please be mindful, these are confidence scores and not accuracy scores. Now, the bot might only be 60, 70, or even 80, 90% confident about what it is seeing. However, the information that it has extracted might be 100% accurate. Which is oftentimes the case if you have a good machine learning model that's trained on these invoices. So yeah, a human would interact with this application to make any changes. For example, if the bot has missed a particular line in the address, or it's not picking up a particular value within the table, such as a unit price or a quantity, you're able to change that, modify that, train. Also, when you make these changes on the screen, the bot is or the machine learning model is retrained to understand that a particular field's value is located at a particular location within that document. Now, this is the UiPath Action Center, another product that is used to manage tasks for humans. Now, the bot earlier, before we launch Action Center, you would either send a notification via email to any of your business leaders to either approve a particular invoice that's over a set amount of dollars, or maybe it needs several levels of approvals before it can be dispersed. You used to manage that by either sending emails or putting the file in a particular location or creating a SharePoint list item or something. Now, in this particular case, all you need to do is create a task in the Action Center. UiPath has pre-built activities and templates for you to enable you to do that. Once a task is created, the corresponding assignee or you can also specify a team, and a task is assigned to that particular team. Anybody within the team logging into Action Center is able to process this information, make changes to or fill the form if it's a form, or just click on approve reject, and at that point this information is handed back to the bot, which at the moment is in a suspended state for the specific transaction that you're working on. And then once this task is completed, the bot will take over, resume, and finish the remaining steps in the automation. So here you can see somebody logging in and assigning it to themselves. As this was assigned to a particular team, it goes into the unassigned queue. There are 3 queues: pending, unassigned, and completed. You also have additional features such as labeling a particular task, grouping tasks based on the department or folders that you create. So I encourage you to sign up for a session on Action Center. And that will give you some details on how you would use Action Center and what features are available. Now, in this example, the bot is using a more modern SAP GUI, which is a SAP 750. The previous example probably used a legacy one, which is 600s. So as you can see, the bot is able to interact and enter information into the SAP GUI. Where would you use success factors? It's primarily being used by the HR department for managing the human resources, such as shortlisting profiles, having them onboarded into the company, creating different accounts, requesting permissions, assets to be allocated to a particular employee. So you could do all of this within SAP SuccessFactors. And then here's an example of a typical onboarding process where a new employee has been hired, and you're tasked to automate the process end to end, while you might be using several other applications in conjunction with SuccessFactors from SAP, such as ServiceNow, where your IT department interacts with any tickets that are created for them to process, such as allocating, let's say, a workstation or granting them access to a specific application. So you could have your UiPath bot create those requests in ServiceNow. You could have another bot running in the background looking for any new requests, and then generating reports of new hires and sending it to your managers, and then maybe keeping track of all the orders for any equipments that have been requested through the ServiceNow portal. Bots can interact with Active Directory to know who the manager is, which department does a particular employee belong to. They can interact with Slack to send updates to those employees for the tickets that have been raised. They can create a purchase request or a purchase order for assets or subscriptions or licenses in Coupa. That's another application that's widely being used by enterprises. And also finally, the bots can place a delivery request for delivering these equipments as well. Here are some of the use cases that that fall under the HR department that our customers have already automated. I'll just let you eyeball that for a minute before I proceed. Here's an example showing that specific automation as well. Now this uses a web version. So the bot is navigating to that specific page or the screen on this application. It is able to enter information into it. Okay. So far you have seen automating SAP using WinGUI as well as the SAP Fiori, which uses web browser, which is browser based. Business One is a legacy offering or legacy application from SAP that a lot of the businesses, especially in the APJ region, are still using. So now the technology that SAP used for Business One is different from what they're currently using for more modern uh, uh, GUI interfaces. Now, that particular technology has some challenges associated with how it's been implemented. However, UiPath is able to still identify those elements either using computer vision or not. So in this particular example, we are using computer vision. And, apologies, we are not using computer vision to collect the information from SAP Business One. You can see these. This is the UiPath Studio where these activities were built. Uh, you can group all of your activities into different sequences. The first sequence that you saw was to launch SAP Business One and log into it using the credentials. The next sequence that you're currently seeing is doing certain operations within SAP Business One where it's entering information into probably a form or something which is like a table or a grid. Let's see that in action. So that's the interface. Uh, it's also able to open documents in the browser. Then it's entering some information that's in a regular field as well as in a grid. So typically, a human task to do this takes anywhere between 15 to 25 minutes to process a particular invoice, while they have to categorize that particular invoice, find the right transaction, launch, login, and enter all of this information, making sure that they go back to the supplier if some information is not present. Now, if you were to automate all of this, it would save a lot of that manual and tedious entering of data into the SAP client. So that's the benefit where you'd save a lot of the time. You could also alternately use this for testing if you're rolling out any changes to your underlying SAP functions. Now this is for same Business One, but it's using computer vision to detect elements on the screen. Now, why would computer vision be required? This is what you would see, or rather, this is what UiPath would see if something's behind Citrix or a remote desktop where we cannot install the remote runtime plugin from UiPath. And if you come across a situation where, let's say, you're using this on you're a local region, but you need to access the application that's hosted globally, but you're not allowed to install something, or the IT has restrictions, then you could still have UiPath Studio installed on your local workstation and be able to interact with these applications using computer vision. So the computer vision pack comes with several activities, again similar to what you had seen in SAP. So some of those activities are clicking on a particular element, identifying a particular field within the uh, screen that you're trying to automate. So here you could see we have dragged and first chosen our screen. Once we do that, we are able to use computer vision to actually detect the different elements present on the screen. So it's really advanced. It's able to also determine whether a particular element is a button or whether it's a input field, and you're able to enter information into that as well. Okay, now you could use UiPath Test Suite for SAP testing. What is UiPath Test Suite? Now, before we go there, we do want to highlight this fact that you might have heard of several Gartner or Forrester Wave reports for RPA products and for business management products or workflow solutions. And as you're aware, UiPath is the market leader in the RPA category and end-to-end automation category. We only have a report from IDC so far in the testing space. The other leading analytics providers have not yet released a report for testing. IDC is the first to release something on the testing landscape, and we are very glad that the year that they started, they have put UiPath in the leaders quadrant along with all those other uh, test products that's in the market. And if you could closely see, it is furthest in terms of strategy. So we have the right strategy to execute for any end-to-end test automation. So that's really a good thing, because we would be able to launch more features that you might need in terms of your testing. We already integrate with several existing lifecycle management tools such as Jira, Azure DevOps. You could even build pipelines and have your path bots trigger when a particular code is checked in. So now UiPath Studio Orchestrator and the bots might be familiar to you. That's what you would use to build any regular business automations. We have launched UiPath Test Manager Hub, which is more so to manage your requirements, your test cases, map those test cases to requirements, and then analyze any test results after running those test cases. Now, you could either use Test Manager or you could use it only to connect to any external system that you are already using for your project management or test management. And that tool could be Jira, DevOps. You can connect it to SAP Solution Manager, which is SAP's offering to manage any test cases within SAP to do SAP testing. So you could use your bots to do the testing, connect to SAP Solution Manager to update or manage those tests. Uh, yeah, this just tells what's the benefit when you use uh, you have a test suite for SAP testing. You basically will save 3 times the amount of time it would generally take to test any changes to your SAP software. here's an example of performing those testing. You have a sample UiPath app called UI Bank. We'll be using some of the pre-built UiPath activities, which is available for you as a package. So this particular icon is for a test case. So you can build a regular business flow in UiPath Studio and also convert it into a test case just by right-clicking on that particular uh, workflow that you have built. Again, if you see whatever the bot is doing is very similar to what an RPA bot would do. You're just wrapping that existing business workflow automation as a test case, and then you'd have additional verification steps added in your Path Studio that would basically verify whatever has been performed. So you have this given a particular set of data. When I perform something on the application, then I expect this to happen. So that's the structure. So given that I'm a logged in user, when I go and create an order, I want to verify that particular order. So you can create all these test cases and run them. Uh, you not only see this information in the studio, but if you publish this into Orchestrator, you'll be able to manage all these test cases and execute them from Orchestrator and analyze the results in Orchestrator as well. Now, this is a web-based SAP HANA application that's being automated. We are trying to enter some details and verify. So you can also randomly generate all these data, or you can specify a Excel sheet or any structured data such as a database as your input data set, and the bot will be able to iterate through those rows of data and run test cases or just create them for future testing. You could your use cases are endless. Now, if there are a lot of businesses that are on the native SAP implementation, and since the time HANA was released, they want to move to HANA because it offers deep analytics and gives you some business insights into how your business is working. So in order to do that, obviously you'll have to migrate all your existing implementations to SAP HANA. And while you do that, you might have several activities that you need to perform that where you can use your bots to actually help migrate from the legacy SAP implementation to a more the SAP S4HANA implementation. So where can you use your path bots? Basically in every stage, but more so this is to highlight during testing you can build regression tests and automate them. You can verify end-to-end business process on multiple systems and devices. You can also perform user acceptance testing, and you can also perform uh, automated assisted manual testing. So what I mean by that is you can use UiPath task capture, which is another tool to basically capture what a human is doing on a particular screen. It will generate, it will take a screenshot of every action that you perform, be it a mouse click or entering some information. And from that, you can actually generate test steps, and that will be a guide for anybody to perform a manual testing based on what it had seen and what you had done when you were recording it. Now here's a sample project plan for doing migration from SAP to SAP S4HANA. And here's some testing needs, and this is a sprint plan. So you could see where you need to do some functional testing, some acceptance testing, and where you need to perform some regression testing, you could use UiPath bots in any of these stages. Process mining. So process mining is, as I mentioned before, it lets you look at what the process are, what are the underlying steps within that specific process, how many of your transactions in the given period were executed in a specific time, which of those cases fall into the regular flow versus any variations to the flow, how many activities are present, how many variations are there uh, in the regular flow, and how many users were involved in performing any of these activities for that specific process. Now, here's an example. I'll fast forward that. So you can see here's a list of all the activities where you're receiving an invoice from a supplier, you're trying to process it and make a payment, or basically dispersing amount for an approved invoice. The other activities that these are the main three or larger activities. There might be other steps, which is such as you do a final check of the invoice, you approve it, and you can see like out of these 1099 invoices, all of them were received, all of them were processed, all of them were paid, but 90% of them needed a final check. For 10%, there was no final check done. Only 77% were approved. For the other invoices, either no approval was required or they were not approved. You could delve deeper by clicking on this and trying to understand what's happening. 28% of those invoices, of these 1099 invoices, had to be sent back to request some additional information. It could be that the particulars listed was incorrect, or the quantity was different, or the totals did not match, or a purchase order number was not provided on the invoice. So you could dive deeper to understand why a particular invoice was sent back. So we'll look at how that's done. So here's our regular flow. If you see the steps are receiving the invoice, processing it, doing a final check, approving the invoice if required, and then paying the invoice. Now you can see the dark blue ones is the regular flow. The one that's a little bit lighter is required in case when the amount is a little bit higher than a threshold value we set. And then there are other variations to the existing regular flow, where you're either requesting some data or you're performing additional checks and approving before you can send it to be disbursed. So here's a rundown of what we say, how the applications have flown. Now, I do want to highlight that this is on historical data. This is not real time. So process mining is not for something where you'd be looking at an invoice that has just arrived. It is more so to run with on historical data to understand how the actual invoice was processed. And you can actually drill down into a specific invoice and see particulars of that invoice. Who are the participants? What did they do? Somebody received it, a bot received it, someone else processed it. Let's go back and pause there. You can see a particular bot received the invoice, and Macy was the one who processed it. Autumn was the one who checked and approved, and finally the system made the payment to a particular bank account. So you can actually do that for any individual invoice that you want to investigate because you found an anomaly for a particular invoice in that process. Now that doesn't restrict only to SAP. You can use process mining to any other large ERP system or a CRM system. We can also build a custom connector if you have a system that's not for which a connector does not exist in our integration. So that's the basically the end of the session on SAP. Here are some customer stories and use cases. I'll just let you read them if you're interested. Feel free to ask any questions either by unmuting yourself or pinging me on the chat. I do want to mention that there's a training or a course available on UiPath Academy. You could register yourselves for that in order to understand those activities that were shown earlier. It will help you understand those better, how to use them, what are the configuration parameters, how you would connect. So all of that is available in that specific course on our academy. We have public-facing documentation for all of these activities as well. They're official documentation from our product team, so feel free to access those. And the course on our academy is completely free. You don't have to sign up for a subscription. It's entirely free. That's the link to our marketplace where we have a lot of these accelerators that you had seen before. And if you have any questions on SAP or you're trying to automate, excuse me, you're trying to automate and you face some challenges, you can definitely post them on our forums. Just tag it with SAP and somebody from an expert from the SAP community will respond. We also have a dedicated YouTube channel for SAP test automation and for SAP accelerators, as well as using the business version of Studio for automating SAP application. Feel free to go through all of that material, and it will really help you fast track building automations for SAP. Any questions?